In 1692, Puritan obsession with the occult came to a bloody climax in the notorious Salem witch trials. Dozens of people were accused of witchcraft. In the end, 20 people were killed, 19 by hanging, and 1 was crushed to death with rocks. But while Puritans waged a virtual holy war on paganism in their midst, not all the American colonies were so hostile. In Virginia, for example, with a large Catholic and Anglican population, the holiday thrived, and Virginia became the birthplace of American Halloween. Halloween parties featuring ghost stories and bobbing for apples were popular in Virginia and in other southern colonies.
All of the colonies believed in witchcraft and magic and the occult. Magic was part of life. And that's the element you need to make sure that Halloween is going to take root again. It's the belief that there is a spirit world.
Some of the most popular Halloween games involved divination, predicting one's future, especially one's romantic prospects. For example, women would look for their future husband's face to appear in foods cooked in a fire. In another popular divination game, a young girl would leave a wet blouse out to dry overnight. While she slept, the man she would marry would come and turn one of the sleeves, or so the superstition went. Divination games were also favorites at big Halloween events called play parties, which were becoming very popular in the early 1800s.
Play parties had a lot of the same elements that we recognize as Halloween today. There were nuts and apples, carved pumpkins, they were community gatherings, there were ghost stories. All those things you can find in a contemporary Halloween or a Halloween of the 20th century.
Halloween would get its biggest boost when an enormous wave of Irish immigrants began coming to America. As their numbers swelled throughout the century, the Irish breathed new life into practices that had already taken hold here. They would bring their traditional Irish Halloween customs, where neighbors and families would carouse long into the night in their homes, sharing scary stories and playing fortune-telling games. These homespun traditions of rural Ireland became enormously popular in the late 19th century, a time of great change in America. The country was in the throes of the industrial age. Millions were flocking from the countryside into the cities, and the rustic values of the Irish newcomers seemed to hearken back to a simpler, easier time.
They carried with them a nostalgia for the old country that became the hallmark of Irish American life. So Irish traditional life became something that was seen as somehow almost something that came from Eden, or a golden age, or a paradise.
And when some long-time Irish Halloween customs didn't quite fit, they were adapted. For example, the American pumpkin proved much easier to carve into jack-o'-lanterns than the turnip used in Ireland. Carving a scary face into the harmless pumpkin typifies the way prudish Victorian America tried to tame Halloween, turning its darker sides into light-hearted fun. By the end of the 19th century, evil deeds and witchcraft on the holiday were nearly gone. It was being replaced by a holiday not just for adults, but one the whole family could take part in. By the dawn of the 20th century, children would take over this ancient festival and make it their own. World War I broke out in 1914. Thousands of Americans were lost in battle. And in the process, the country would lose its innocence as well. America was growing up, and the ancient traditions of Halloween had to grow up with it.
People were getting a lot more practical and a lot more educated. And the newspapers stopped being filled with recipes and entertainments and started to be filled with real subjects substance. And people just kind of came to earth right there, and we couldn't give up Halloween, so we dressed up the kids and sent them to parties.
Stay-at-home Halloween parties for adults were fading away, and events for kids took prominence. Children took Halloween out of the home and into the neighborhood. But with children let loose came a resurgence of the dark side that had long bedeviled the holiday: pranks and vandalism. In the 1930s in Queens, New York, for example, young vandals smashed 1,000 windows on Halloween night. At times, the pranks even turned deadly. Halloween was getting out of control, and communities had to find ways to rein it in. Starting in the 1920s, the little town of Anoka, Minnesota, addressed this problem head-on by throwing the country's first big civic Halloween parade. Storyteller Garrison Keillor remembered what it was like to grow up in the Halloween capital of the world.
There was a big granite chip mosaic on the corner of 2nd Avenue and Main Street that said, Anoka, Minnesota, Halloween capital of the world, and a black witch in the center of it. So there was proof. When you're a little child, you take seriously what grown people tell you, especially if it's pretty extravagant. And so I believed this without any question, that somehow out of the entire world, Anoka, Minnesota, had been chosen to be the capital.
Anoka's Halloween parade was launched with a clear goal in mind: tame the children. Anoka, like so many other towns, was looking for a way to rein in the chaos of Halloween.
The reason for Halloween in Anoka, the big civic part of it, the children in their costumes marching down the street, was to try to blunt or thwart the tradition of vandalism, mischief, which was the other side of Halloween, of course.
But even well-meaning Anoka couldn't squelch Halloween mischief altogether. Pranks like this, building collages of junk on neighbors' rooftops, were among the vandals' favorite tricks.
You could toilet paper somebody's house, and I don't know if you've ever tried to get wet toilet paper out of a very tall maple tree, but after you've done that, you start to believe in capital punishment.
Anoka blazed the trail, and the rest of the country soon followed. Popular culture embraced the Halloween craze, sweeping across America, all the way to Hollywood. But the fun would be short-lived. In the early 1940s, the Second World War broke out. Americans were not in a festive mood. Resources were scarce. Costume parties and giving candy were frowned upon. Kids had more urgent matters on their minds, like collecting scrap metal for the war effort. In many cities, Halloween activities were canceled. But after the war, big Halloween events for kids came roaring back with the same worries in mind: keep it safe.
There were even radio stations during the 40s and 50s who would give away prizes. You would enter your name at the community party, and then if you were home in 30 minutes, that's when they'd make the calls from the radio station. So you'd only win if you were home 30 minutes after the party was over. So they had all sorts of way of making sure that kids went right home.
After the war, America was prosperous like never before. This sense of well-being brought on a surge in buying and a baby boom.
Groups of boys and girls march to the town recreation center where the Halloween party is going to be held.
This new generation embraced Halloween. Costume parties and trick-or-treating became favorite Halloween pastimes.
Here we go, right over here.
Even the children of Hollywood's most famous reveled in this important and delightful rite of passage.
Where's your mother, Judy Garland? Is she here?
No.
Where's Judy today?
Mommy's at home.
Here's Candy Bergen. Hello, honey. Turn around here so everybody can see you.
Children everywhere took part.
He's at home.
Events like organized trick-or-treating and Halloween parties helped subdue Halloween's more mischievous side. But the slumbering ancient ghost of Halloween couldn't stay quiet for long. By the 1970s and 80s in Detroit, roving groups of youths began